believe, believe, believe. Time is never time at all. You can never ever leave without leaving a piece of you. And our lives are forever changed. We will never be the same. The more you change, the less you feel. Believe, believe in me. Believe, believe. Let me turn the sound off my phone. I was going to give it a couple minutes, but, you know, I can just use this time to start talking about the eclipse. Because we're going to do that quickly. We have a lunar eclipse coming up in just a few days. I guess a week. I should move my vacuum. Like, oh, look, my vacuum. Oh. My vacuum's in the back. You probably just saw that my bottoms don't match my top. I'm lazy. It's like, you know, one of those lazy people who works from home and goes on, Zoom meetings with, just underwear or something. Jake, I'm on my boyfriend's YouTube. Well, good. So hopefully we don't monopolize your boyfriend's phone too much. Oh, sorry, I called you Jake. And you're not Jake. Who is this? I mean, do you mind telling me who you are? And then I do want to talk a little bit about the eclipse before we, get into people's chart readings. Because this is quite important. This is quite important. And I'm going to clip this, clip it for another video. And please, if you haven't seen my video on a second civil war, the possibility of it, it's really good. You should watch it. I'm not going to tell you everything in it, but it's really, really good. And it's really good information. And it's stuff that everyone needs to know. His whole feed is astrology now. Poor guy. Poor Jake. He's going to have lots of astrology stuff and then slutty old me, I'm fucking pissed off right now, though. I just had this person, like, ugh. I hate when motherfuckers think like I chose to be trans or some shit, It's really frustrating, like, oh, why didn't you just do this or that? I didn't have a choice in the matter, that's why, Anyway, take a sip of water. Excuse me. And before we get into live chart readings and all this wonderful stuff, I do want to talk about the lunar eclipse happening in just a week on September the 17th. And I have the chart for the eclipse up here. And it's really important because you see eclipses are like supercharged new moons and full moons. The new moon, of course, is a solar eclipse, right? Where the sun and moon are conjunct, right? And the lunar eclipse is a full moon, right? When they're opposite. But you can tell they are eclipses when the sun and moon are conjunct the lunar nodes within 15 degrees or so, you see. So perhaps a bit wider than a conjunction in general, but that's what we consider. And why is that? Well, because the lunar nodes, what are they? You may recall from my other talks that the lunar nodes are where the moon's orbit, right, on its tilt, intersects the Earth's orbit around the sun, you see? And that intersection is what we call the lunar nodes. And when the moon is ascending towards celestial north, that's called the north node, you see? Or the ascending node. And when the moon is moving downward, right? All these are relative directions, you see? When it's moving downward, though, that intersection, I should probably have some charts up or something. I guess I'll do that in the recording. That's called the descending or south node, you see. Good morning, hello, or afternoon, whatever it is for you. It's still technically morning for me. My hair's still wet, you see. I usually always put it up, I never keep it down. So anyway, the reason why those are eclipses, right? When a new moon or the full moon are conjunct or within 15 degrees of the lunar nodes, because those are the places where sun, moon, and earth align, right? So a solar eclipse is like a new moon, yes, but the moon is in between the sun and the earth. So it looks like, the sun's light is being eclipsed by the moon. Whereas with a lunar eclipse, yes, it's a full moon, and it's the earth that's between the sun and the moon, right? So the earth is eclipsing the moon, yes. Excuse me, I'm burping really quick. Don't worry, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. I just want like a quick 15-20 minute video to post about the eclipses, you see. And I want to make sure we talk about it because there are some interesting features that are important to you all as well, right? So it's important here. It's very important here. Yes? So these are the eclipsing places, the lunar nodes, because that's the place of alignment, yes? And for ancient peoples, particularly in ancient astrology, right? The nodes were known as the dragon's head, the north node, and the dragon's tail, the south node. And why is that? Because during an eclipse, it looked as if a dragon were devouring the sun or devouring the moon, yes? When they got briefly eclipsed. And so these were, for the most part, considered malefic events, right? Because the sun was so important, right? It was the feature in the sky. And everything in astrology is determined by the sun, right? Rulerships and all these sorts of things. Thank you so much, Loki. Thank you, thank you. I will get to your stuff in just a second. But let's look at the chart of this eclipse really quick, just so we can get a little, little inkling here. Now, the thing about solar eclipses, right? We know that new moons are like new beginnings, right? It's the starting over of a small cycle. And so, with solar eclipses, it's like a supercharged new moon, a supercharged new beginning. And so eclipses typically signify big beginnings and endings in our lives. And where or what areas of life are being affected or in which those changes are taking place is indicated by the house placement of the eclipse. So, and we're going to talk about some brief horoscopes for each rising sign just to give a little, and this is all off the cuff. It's not like I planned a bunch of this shit. But it's important. It's important. Now, first of all, I'm really sorry I haven't gone live in a while. I've been having medical issues, I just got a tooth fixed, and I really wasn't keen on going live, and there was a lot else going on. A kind reading before when we were led on funds. Oh, thank you, sweetheart. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You are so sweet. I really appreciate your help and support. Thank you, darling. Thank you. So what you'll notice on the chart here, first of all, is this is a full moon. The sun is in Virgo, of course, and the moon is in Pisces, right? So, and where are the nodes? Well, here's the north node in Aries, right? And it's about, we got 5 degrees plus 6, so about 11 degrees away, right, from the sun and the moon. This is the north node. The south node would be over here, of course, opposite the north. You see, it's just not on the chart. But there's several things that affect an eclipse, yeah? One of those things is whether the sun or the moon is conjunct the south or the north node, right? The north node increases things, right? It makes it a more active eclipse, right? It signifies things that are more outward manifesting, Yeah, as opposed to a south node eclipse, which is sort of more passive and decreasing, you see. So those things make a difference in how we subjectively experience the quality of an eclipse. Yes. And what you should also notice is that the moon is being flanked on either side by Saturn and Neptune, right? So this is sort of a Neptunian eclipse. And we know, right, at least in modern astrology, that Neptune sort of signifies deception. It signifies intoxication. It can signify also spiritual aspiration and idealism, right? But the negative side of it has to do with lies. And I really think that on a national scale, we're going to see stuff having to do with lies, quite frankly, with a lot of widespread deception. And we've already been seeing it, especially in politics and especially with the presidential election. And I'm not going to make any bones about who I support. I mean, it's pretty obvious. I don't support Trump, that's for sure. I critically support Kamala. I just wish she would take more decisive stances on things, like things that would materially help our lives, like the price gouging thing, you know. My north node is in Aries. See, then you are in what's called your nodal return. Yeah? This is called your nodal return. It happens around age 37, 38, you see, because the nodes have a cycle of 18.6 years, which means it takes the nodes about 18.6 years to return to the same place in the zodiac, right? That's the completion of a lunar precession cycle. Yeah. So anyway, now we talked about this Neptune thing. What about Saturn? Saturn is like, 10 degrees away, but still co-present with the moon. And so this is quite interesting. So you see, and Saturn is retrograde right now. So we're in a process of structures, of power relations, right? Of control and all these sort of Saturnian themes. It's sort of being turned on its head. Yeah. So, of course, Saturn was going retrograde, I believe, when we were first talking about Biden stepping down and all that. But what's more important here is that we have to be aware that this is not an active process. Now, yeah, it's a North Node, new moon. So these are supercharged endings, you see? These are supercharged endings. But there's something that delays the manifestation because Saturn is involved, you see? So we're not going to really see clearly until Saturn goes direct again, right? And when Saturn's retrograde, it's more of a reflective time where we sort of assess and consider how well we've accomplished, right? How well we've built, how well we've gone after our goals, how well I hate the word manifest, because it gets so beaten to death, but how well we've produced or manifested things in our material lives, not just thinking about them. Yeah. And so this isn't typically an active time. However, this lunar eclipse is sort of saying, hey, whatever happens here might take a bit longer. And we know that the effects of an eclipse sort of show up for the subsequent 6 months or so till we get to the next eclipse. But that these things are sort of delayed a bit. And so, this is the 4th house of the United States, for example, Pisces is. And it's sort of interesting because Saturn going through the 4th house, it has to do with patriotism and homeland, right? And we're being forced to face like sort of these destructive undercurrents within our history and our culture that have never really been properly addressed, right? So it's not like anything new is necessarily happening. It's all this stuff that was sort of bubbling under the surface is emerging, But this is a necessary process because as more light is available, as people get more inclusive, understanding, and progressive, then the darkness or the reactionary forces, yeah, those forces who would try and take us backwards rather than forwards, they get way more vocal, pronounced, and antagonistic, right? So anyway, so this is a normal thing, especially when it comes to Pluto and Capricorn, and Pluto going back into Aquarius very soon here in mid-November, right? Because Pluto and Capricorn represents a sort of dismantling process of established structures, whereas Pluto and Aquarius just sort of brushes them out of the way to make way for new structures. So we'll see how that shakes down. But let's go to some quick horoscopes here, because we're already 15 minutes in. And I want to make sure we talk about what this means for you. So we'll start with Aries rising, which puts the eclipse itself in your 12th house. Yeah? So this is a difficult one in a way, because even though it's a North Node eclipse and supposedly active and all this sort of thing, the 12th house can be a bit depressing. On a positive note, it takes you out of the craziness of life. This has to do with reflection and possibly facing, right? Facing self-destructive tendencies that may still be lingering, right? Now, Saturn is in your 12th house, and whatever house Saturn is in will be the same house that this eclipse is in. And so this eclipse is sort of, it's getting us to reflect on how we've done in those areas of life in which Saturn is currently in, right? So with you here, it's sort of facing a sense of exile. It's facing how you've dealt with isolation. I know when I went through Saturn in my 12th house, I very literally had moved in with friends, during my divorce. So there's a sense of being rejected and exile and all this sort of thing. So the lunar eclipse is representing sort of a close to part of this chapter in your life. So this is also a time for optimism and reflection, because you need to hold out a vision for how you're going to progress when Saturn goes direct again. And this is all about taking this feeling of exile and perhaps this time of inactivity and using it to face self-destructive tendencies that may have lingered on in your life. So, but let's go on. Lachana Adams, hi, my darling. Hello. Okay, so for Taurus rising, this puts the eclipse in your 11th house, right? And Saturn has been in your 11th house, right, for a while, since last year. And when Saturn goes through our 11th house, it's sort of isolating too, different from the 12th house though. It's like we get removed from, our typical networks of people. Oftentimes there's a sense of cynicism that takes over. We lose our typical, sense of progress and optimism. The 11th house is hopes and wishes and friends. So this lunar eclipse here is also holding out a bit of hope that part of this situation, if you've been dealing with this sense of isolation or being rejected by friends or peers or feeling like you don't get support from anyone, then this sort of phase of your life is coming to a close. You still have some more time, right, of Saturn left in your 11th house, right, till summer of next year. But you see, this is signaling that there's light at the end of the tunnel. When we get into the final sort of stretch of Saturn and the sign, we start to see light at the end of the tunnel with regards to those areas of life that Saturn had been depressing. So take this as an optimistic sign when you start to cultivate, right, a sense of optimism once again. So please try and let go of the cynicism with some of this, because this is, a big part of it. Now, the Neptune thing can be encouraging, because it's like, really, you need to hold out an idealistic vision for the future and a vision for who and what you want to be. Now let's move on to Gemini rising. And this puts the eclipse in the 10th house, which is really interesting, you see. When Saturn is in your 10th house, like has been happening, It often feels like we lose our life direction, that the things we wanted in life are sort of elusive, that we don't get the job, we don't get the recognition, we don't get the accolades, right? We don't get the appreciation, you know? So it feels like we're stunted, like, we're not going anywhere. But you see, this is wonderful. This is wonderful because new opportunities open up after this. So to me, this lunar eclipse is showing that a period of feeling sort of unappreciated or derailed, right? Like your direction in life is derailed, or like life has become unsatisfying and you're not getting what you thought you wanted. This is wonderful because it's bringing a close to that, and hopefully new areas, new avenues, new possible projects or jobs or whatever are hopefully kind of showing up or starting to emerge, or you're seeing the possibilities of this sort of thing. So to me, this is also a very sort of optimistic thing, right? So hold out a vision. Of course, Neptune is vision for the kind of life direction you want, right? What would be fulfilling to you? Yes, we have to start to imagine a new modus operandi that matches the values that we've sort of cultivated over the past 6 months to a year or whatever. Hopefully you have been going through changes, because that's what this signifies, you see? That's what this signifies. And let's move on to Cancer rising. So you see, for Cancer rising, this puts the eclipse in the 9th house. So Saturn has been going through the 9th house for a while, which sort of deconstructs our sense of belief. It often makes us feel stuck and stagnant, like if we wanted to go places or get out. If you had a desire to travel or something, it feels like it's, once again, elusive. That you feel tied down, you feel anchored, right, in your home area, and perhaps getting dissatisfied with it. You want to move, you want to run away, I want to go, right? I want to get away. I want to fly away, right? I just want to fly. Oh, wait, no. I mixed up the two songs. I was thinking Lenny Kravitz, I just want. How does it go? I started singing Sugar Ray instead of Lenny Kravitz. I want to get away. I wanna fly away. Yeah, yeah. Right, that's the Lenny Kravitz one. But it's not just that. It has to do with your values. So your values have been probably getting unsatisfying or dissatisfying in a certain way. You're changing. You're starting to appreciate different things, perhaps, right? So this lunar eclipse represents closing the door, right, on certain ways of thinking. Now, you may have felt deceived. Maybe you became aware of new information. Maybe you realize that your philosophies or your values in life or your politics don't serve who you've become, right? What you care about now. And perhaps you've been becoming more inclusive in your views. So it's about finding and learning new ways of understanding, right? Of sort of integrating the facts, right? Or the new awareness you've achieved, and putting that into a new worldview, a new overarching framework that helps you understand and approach the world in perhaps a, moral, spiritual, or political way. So that you have your own, goals and motives about how to be of service, really. So the 9th house is the house of God. And consequently, the house of our values, spirituality, religion, philosophy, and even politics. So use this time to start to learn new things. And Neptune here should make it more idealistic and inclusive, hopefully. But let's move on to Leo rising, or Leo rising Hermes. This puts the eclipse in your 8th house, right? That's the house of death, you see? It's the house of other people's stuff. Um, Oftentimes, I consider it the house of forgiveness, right? It's where we store some of our traumas and our hurts, right? Because those have to do with debts, right? Emotional debts and settling those types of things. So with Saturn in the eighth house for a while now, this whole period has been about a sense of loss, unfortunately. Maybe you went through actual deaths of people you knew, or maybe you had a significant loss of money, you see? Or maybe you started to commingle your money with a partner. You started sharing or whatever. I know that happened to me when I had this transit. Me and an ex-partner got a bank account together, right? I mean, isn't that intimate? But with the lunar eclipse here, it's bringing sort of a close to this chapter, whatever it's been for you. Perhaps you start to pay things off more. You start to feel a bit of relief, a bit more relief. And maybe you start to see death, not so much as what's the word? A discouraging process, even though it can be, and we can get very depressed with it. But it's also a process of letting go, of shedding things that are just extra, that don't serve you anymore, right? That just you're carrying around like a weight. Like, you think of Mr. T with all of his gold chains, Like, that shit looks heavy, yo. I don't want to walk around with all that. And so that's what it kind of is. It's letting go. Letting go of certain material attachments. Letting go of old wounds and hurts. Letting go of painful memories. And not like you don't have to process them. Of course you do, right? But we process them in order to let them go so that they don't just hang around us, right? We have to learn to forgive ourselves. We have to learn to let ourselves feel things, right? We have to allow ourselves to feel things and fall apart sometimes. So, try not to hold on too hard to what's going on. Yeah. Thank you, Quantum Function. Bexy, of course, you're so sweet. Bexy, I know, is busy right now, but she's attending my live because she's my wonderful, sweet girl. So anyway, let's move on to Virgo rising, right? This puts the eclipse in your 7th house. Yes. And this is important because Saturn has been going through your 7th house. And what this should be making you aware of, either A, straining your relationships, which often happens because we've sort of learned a hyper-independence, but it can also deepen commitments. The problem about the deepening commitments is that it can make us feel trapped, right? Like, I moved in with an ex-partner when I had this transit. Like, we moved in together and we didn't move out of each other's space until we finally got divorced, many, many years later. So you just need to be aware that there's sort of two sides to this. On the one hand, the straining of commitments and hyper independence, like, I need my space, I'll do it myself. And on the other hand, the deepening of commitments, sometimes with the added sense of feeling trapped or being sort of sucked into it against your will. And then this lunar eclipse here is sort of signifying to you, excuse me, is sort of signifying to you that a period here is ending. So you could be meeting new people, right? You could meet a new partner over the next 6 months or so. Or you could feel like, oh my goodness, this relationship is no longer serving me and it has trapped me and I need to let go, right? I need to let go of this. So that's all very important stuff, you see? Because by the end of this transit, you're going to have a greater sense of security in yourself, hopefully, to where you can properly approach relationships. A big lesson that we learn here with this is that we can't necessarily force people, right? And we keep having to fall in love over and over again. Because you know what? We change as people, don't we? And if we're not changing, then I'm sorry, then you're going backwards, or you're not a very constructive person, because we need to change. We need to grow. Yes? We need to understand new things. We need to develop new connections and relationships with people, right? So, you see here, on the one hand, there's a sense of letting go of relationships that don't serve you anymore and being open to new ones with people who, might not be your typical type, right? But people who are also more independent. If you aren't finding new relationships, it's about learning to love our current partners over again, learning to get to know them again, right? Who they are on the inside as they feel themselves now, right? Because they've probably been changing too. But let's move on. Now, you see the moon has changed signs, but we're doing this for the sake of, so you can see your rising sign here. So don't trip too much about it. Look at the house of Pisces, right? So this is Libra rising, yeah? Now the moon is in Pisces for this eclipse, so don't pay attention to that. But see, this is quite important because this is your 6th house. And this is another very difficult house. It's the house of servitude, right? Of health and wellness. Excuse me, injuries, illnesses, sickness, enemies, right? So the other thing about the 7th house is we have opponents and oppositions there too. So you could also see, having to compete with someone for a job or a promotion, or I don't know. But there's a sense of competition usually with Saturn in the 7th house. Now Saturn in the 6th house often strains our health. You see, when Saturn comes out of the 5th house into the 6th, it's like, pardon me. It's like we start picking up the pieces of all the chaos that happened in the previous cycle. Sorry, I have a hiatal hernia, and it's like, ugh. Anyway, so we start to pick up the pieces of the previous cycle. We take responsibility for our lives, and it can be a painful period because it's all the shit we don't want to do. We often have to face our own health crises as well. I know when I went through this, it's when I first started feeling my POTS, right? Which is a chronic illness that I have. So, but it forces us to face these sorts of things. You may notice flare-ups with all that sort of stuff, with chronic illness or whatever. And you may find yourself having to, take care of stuff that you would let kind of fall by the wayside over time. And so this eclipse, this lunar eclipse, is about bringing a close to part of that chapter, right? There should be a project or something interesting like that, something that has been plaguing you or causing you extra stress that should be coming to a close. If you have been having chronic health issues, this is a time when you start to feel a bit of respite, right? You get some relief from these sorts of things. Perhaps you start seeing a new doctor, right? Perhaps you find treatments for whatever you're going through. Yes? The other thing about this could be problems with animals or pets. Like often we have a pet die or something like that, which is a terrible experience. It's awful. And if it's something that you've been dealing with lately, I'm sorry, right? But once again, this is another indicator of learning to let go, right? And that's one thing about death also. It's learning, to let people go, depending on what you believe. We don't hold people back. If you do believe in a soul and an afterlife and all this sort of thing, that's wonderful. And you don't want to hold people here, do you? You want to let them go to be a part of something greater, whatever that means. I don't necessarily believe in anything or not believe in anything. So I'm just saying this for your benefit if you do, right? But let's move on to Scorpio rising. So this is the 5th house here, right? Now we were talking about Saturn in the 5th house sometimes indicating chaos. And it can, right? Life is not fun because we're busy putting out all kinds of small fires all the time, you see? You know? You have to be careful because it's easy here to let things fall by the wayside because it's always a sense of emergency and urgency, right? If you have kids, it's often a pain in the ass with them or they face difficulties of their own. I've known Scorpio risings that, who had kids facing difficulties in school or changing schools or dealing with bullies and stuff like that, you see, persistent issues. On the other hand, though, it's impossible to have fun, isn't it? Right? It's straining our sense of fun. So once again, it's chaotic because we're always having to pick up these pieces of a sense of urgency and emergency, right? And then, like, we actually do take responsibility for all this chaos, usually when Saturn goes in to the 6th house, right? Which happens for you next year. So now the optimistic side of this, with the moon here, with Neptune being in your 5th house, is about having fun, is about a sense of enjoyment. So my Scorpio risings, my dear Scorpio risings, wait, we're on Scorpio rising, pets might pass. No, that was for the 6th house. That was for Libra rising. And that's like the most difficult scenario. Like, please don't assume or be afraid. Don't be scared that your pets are going to pass, right? Haitian immigrants are not going to eat them. Such bullshit in the fucking media right now. They're repeating all this nonsense about Haitian immigrants are eating our cats and dogs. It's fucking bullshit. So no, that's not necessarily going to happen. It's one of the more extreme cases, you see. Usually it has more to do with chronic illness, with the sense of servitude and submission, right? Having to take on a servile role, right? Having to sublimate your will and your ego and your pride. But usually I see it having to do with chronic health issues, you see. Like I said, I had my POTS issues sort of, get bad during that time. So anyway, now back to Scorpio rising. This thing in the 5th house is pretty cool because it's signifying to me that you're starting to learn to have fun again. Or you will be over the next 6 months. Now with Saturn, of course, it's delayed. But Neptune's holding out that sense of optimism that, you know what? We do have to learn to have fun again. Just Neptune is also intoxication. So don't be like, oh, party, and shirk your responsibilities and give yourself a bad hangover just because you started feeling like you got let out of your cage again. But that's what this is about, to me. It's about, we got to start to enjoy ourselves again. Otherwise, life feels meaningless. I don't know about you, but fun is one of my big things. And the 5th house is also sex and children. So it could bring a close to difficulties that your children have been dealing with, or at least to, a phase of whatever this issue has been. But on the other hand, it could also be about you, having more sexual enjoyment, being more childlike, going to concerts, having fun, all this sort of stuff, right? So that's important. I know for me, anyway, I shouldn't talk about me that much. But you see, so this is all good. Now let's move on to Sagittarius rising, or Snagimatarius rising Hermes. So this is the 4th house. And remember, the United States has a Sagittarius rising too. So once again, 4th house being highlighted. So oftentimes this makes us feel like a stranger in our own home or in our own land. We feel rejected by the place of our birth. Sometimes we get cut off from our family or our genealogy, or we find uncomfortable things about it. Yeah? And that can be quite difficult. You see, sometimes if we're looking for a new home or living situation, all that gets delayed. We have issues with landlords sometimes. Or we have strains with our parents or grandparents. Yes? Because the 4th house is our origins. It's the house of the father, typically. It's not the house of the mother. That's a modern, mistake. It's originally the house of the father. And also the private life. Sometimes we feel like our private life keeps getting exposed, right? We can't just enjoy ourselves. We can't have our own space. Everything keeps getting pulled out into the spotlight, and we just want to be left alone, you know? We want to recharge our batteries. So what this signifies with the lunar eclipse here is that a situation is improving. Either you do find a new living situation, you reconcile or make new agreements with a landlord or property management company. You know, you figure shit out with your neighbors, although the neighbors are often the third house. But the other important side of it is that if you have been having issues with your parents, I mean, if you're older, sometimes your parents are sick or, you know, they're facing the last stage of their lives. Or sometimes it's that we've had strained relationships. And with Saturn, right, these things last a long time. So it might be some harbored resentment that we're finally resolving, you see. So this could be another wonderful opportunity for you, right? And Neptune is holding out the possibility. And Neptune is holding out the possibility of hope. Yeah? Of hope for your parents' situation on the one hand, of hope for your own sort of your spiritual development, because the fourth house is the hidden thing. And also, you know, hope for finding solace in your own private life, making your home space again. The big lesson of this transit is home is where you make it, right? Wherever you are home. Bexy says, did you cover Gemini rising? I did. Yes. For Gemini rising, it's the 10th house. It's the 10th house, Bexy. So you can watch it later, but I'll tell you once again, just a quick little digest. With the lunar eclipse being in the 8th house, the 10th house rather, the sense of being stumped and stifled and held back at work or in your life direction, maybe feeling dissatisfied with your life direction or feeling directionless, is sort of coming to a close, right? This is the prelude to the close, right? The close really happens next year. But from here on out, there's a sense of optimism that you start to cultivate with your life direction, right? If you felt like life got derailed or, you know, like what you thought you wanted, you no longer do. Saturn and this lunar eclipse are pushing you in a new way. You know, it's like when the train tracks move. Yeah? That sort of thing. So it is an optimistic time. You know, you need to be open to different professional paths, or, you know, it doesn't even have to be career. It can be what you're known for, what you enjoy doing. You're an artist, you know. Could have to do with that sort of thing. Right? So now let's go to Capricorn rising. Once again, remember that it's going to be in Pisces. I know the moon is in Aries here, but don't pay attention to that. So the lunar eclipse is in your 3rd house, and Saturn's been there for a while. This stifles our sense of education, our sense of expression, our sense of speech. It strains relationships with extended family, siblings, aunts, uncles, that sort of thing. It makes us feel rejected by our community, right? Problems with neighbors, people encroaching on our boundaries and borders, right? Difficult times in school if you're trying to, you know, finish up your education, get a certification or a degree. These things get delayed. These things get delayed, you see. So what the lunar eclipse signifies here to me is sort of a renewed optimism, either with a school or work project, right, where we have to present something, either a paper or a document or a presentation, something that has to do with writing and speaking and expression, right? And so you may find inspiration Or you may have found that you were tongue-tied before, or, were had a difficult time forming your thoughts and trying to get across what you wanted. And you see now you're going to have a greater facility with these things. With Neptune here, it's about speaking of idealism, speaking of new visions. It's trying to articulate new ways of doing things that could be more inclusive and better. Just watch out that you're not bullshitting people or blowing smoke up their butts, right? You have to be careful of that sort of thing, because the tendency here is going to be to exaggerate perhaps a little bit. So, just be aware of all that. And if you have been having issues with extended family or siblings, this could be a time when you feel like it's worthwhile to make amends, right? The resentment, the Saturnian resentment and harboring it, it takes away from you. It's just extra energy that you spend towards being resentful towards someone. And even if you think, well, I don't spend energy towards it, whenever you think about the person, you do, even if you're not thinking about them very often. So you see, this is an important time, right? And you should be learning new things, exploring new ways of thought. The third house is also news and media that we consume, right? So if you're a content creator, hopefully you're starting to get your creative spark back, yeah? So, and feeling like you get your voice back, yeah? Feeling like you get your sense of independent expression back. Maybe you were feeling self-conscious about your intelligence and all that stuff before. And hopefully now, that stuff is starting to improve. I'm going to go through this next year. I hope it's not too bad. I can't imagine my expression being stifled. I don't stop talking. Well, let's go to Aquarius rising, though, because this is me. Aquarius rising. Yes. I'm your Aquarius rising, Hermie. So you see, this puts the lunar eclipse in our second house of money, right? Personal resources, finances, our possessions. It can be our livelihoods, our businesses, that sort of thing. I'm a small businesswoman, right? So Saturn's been in here depressing our sense of growth in terms of money or business or whatever. I know it's been a strain for me, and I've been really worried about money. So thank you all who support me. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Because yes, I've been really worried about money, and I need this stuff to work. I need this to work. Because I'll probably never be able to get a conventional job again with how much shit I've said online. Well, and my chronic illnesses. So anyway, you see, Saturn's been straining things here, but the lunar eclipse is saying, gosh, there's going to be a greater sense of prosperity coming up. We're going to get a prelude to a greater feeling of security when it comes to our possessions and our financial situation. So even though we've been probably pretty scared and strained about all this, it's still, there's a sense of optimism. Now we have to be careful we don't get overly optimistic and spend too much money, which I know I have a tendency to do. Because look, Jupiter rules my second house and he's in Sagittarius, my 11th. So it's like, ooh, spend money, but we have to learn to be judicious with our resources. So on the one hand, there's a greater sense of financial security that comes out of this over the next 6 months. But on the other hand, there's a greater sense of responsibility, right? Of frugality and being resourceful, planning ahead and not just sort of spending by the seat of our pantses. Yeah. So we need to learn to be optimistic with this, but not too optimistic. But let's move on to our final friend, Pisces rising, because we've gone on for 49 minutes with all this, and we need to get to your individual charts, right? But you see, this is such an important fucking thing. It's very, very important. So you see here, Saturn is going through the first house of Pisces rising. It's the first house of self, right? This is you, okay? And when Saturn goes through our first house, like this was one of the most memorable times of my life, because it's when I came out as transgender. We get faced with parts of ourselves that we never dealt with before. Sometimes we get morose You know, we get a little depressing, which helps us lose weight. It's not really that we're trying that hard, it's that we're depressed oftentimes. But it's not all depressing. Sometimes we face our own sense of death and mortality, right? Because that's what Saturn is. And the first house is us. And really, what this sense of death and everything should start to teach us is it's not to lament or grieve too much over ourselves, but to live, right? Death can happen any moment, and we have to feel death each second in order to live properly. How much are we afraid of life? Because the sense of death is sort of looming in the background, and we don't take it seriously. We think, well, we'll just live forever, and we're more scared of what'll happen to us in life, that people won't like us, or they're going to criticize us, or they'll do this or that, you know. But what we should learn is that we have to take a chance in life. And it's not about being stupid and charging off and doing this, like, oh, Saturn girl told me to go skydiving. You know, I don't know. I mean, that's your fucking problem. But what I am saying is that we start to have a bit more courage. We start to be ourselves, our more authentic selves. So you see, whatever that is has been stifled now for since March 2023, you know. And so this is a time of optimism in a way, because you cultivate a sense of yourself, right? You may have started to feel yourself in a whole new way, you see? And so this is about letting go of parts of yourself that really don't make sense to you anymore. Just another wave function. As a Pisces rising, I've had a very intense feeling of existential dread. It's totally understandable. You see, that's a totally understandable feeling, and actually very characteristic of this transit. But you see, this is a wonderful example, because the lunar eclipse is about quelling that sense of dread. It should be offering up a vision of optimism that's existential hope. Not even hope. Hope is just the other side of dread and fear, right? We oscillate between these two things. It's about a sense of presence and being here that doesn't have an opposite. You see? It's about being and being here and finding a sense of contentment and security in whatever is, in your existence itself. Existential dread comes from what? It comes from imagination in our heads that something terrible is going to happen. And sometimes we've had so much experience along those lines that is ultimately true for us. But what this is showing us here, this lunar eclipse with Neptune so close, is that there's more to it than that, right? And that you can't have bad without good. And so in each of these circumstances, there's the potential and the possibility for greater self-knowledge, for greater happiness and greater integration. For example, my divorce was one of the worst periods of my life, but it also led to one of the best periods of my life, you see? It led to the best part of my life. And I could regret having gotten married in the first place, but no, I have such a wonderful child, you know? So, you see, it depends on what our lives are like. And, you know, people go through really dramatic upheavals, and there is definitely no silver lining sometimes. Like, I imagine what's going on in Gaza, and there's no silver lining or lesson, I would sort of say to people. But at least in your case, there's so much to be hopeful for. And it's not that, see, the existential dread, it comes from holding on to parts of ourselves that we're afraid to lose, you know? And what we start to realize through this transit is that letting go of these parts ourselves is liberating. And it helps us to feel more as we are, right? I was holding on to this sense of trying to be a manly dude and all these sorts of things I thought women wanted. And I had to let go of it in order to be myself and ultimately be fulfilled and happy. And it wasn't about a sense of hope or dread on either side. I mean, it was at first. But eventually it was just about being. It was just like, this is what is. It's about radical acceptance of what is. right? And remember the serenity prayer, right? Lord, grant me um, the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, and the courage to change the things I cannot accept, and the wisdom to tell the difference between the two. This should be all of our rallying cry, regardless of the whole, Alcoholics Anonymous thing or whatever the fuck it is. I'm saying it because it's about letting go and recognizing when we need to accept reality, as astrology teaches us, and when we need to put our will into altering reality as much as we can. We may not have a lot of influence, but we can work at least the little bit that we have, you see? So it's all very important stuff. And I spent a lot of time talking about Pisces rising here, but I think it's important because Saturn going through the first house is one of the most important transits you'll go through in your life. It really is, you see, at least in my opinion. So anyway, I just want to finish this up really quick by saying a couple of things. And I wish I'd said some of these things at the beginning, of course. Let me go back to Aries rising, or the previous Gemini rising, so we can see the eclipse, right? So what's really important about this eclipse, apart from being a sort of a Neptune eclipse, is the fact that it's happening in the same house that Saturn is transiting for you, because the moon is going to be in Pisces and Saturn has been in Saturn. Saturn has been in Pisces as well. Pardon me. So you see, the house that Saturn has been transiting for you has been showing you delays, struggles, resentment, perhaps even depression, loss of hope, or a sense of derailment in the area of life indicated by that house, right? But this lunar eclipse, right? Remember, these are supercharged endings. So it's bringing a close to a phase of this whole Saturn process for you. So the strains and struggles that Saturn has been imposing on your life, this lunar eclipse represents a relief, a possible relief, and a vision of optimism towards the future, because Neptune is conjunct. Yes? So this is why this is a big deal to me. Because there's a connection between all the pain and struggle that Saturn has been precipitating, and the awareness and the looking ahead to when Saturn moves on. It's when we start to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and we start to recognize some of the fulfillment of Saturn, you see? So this is a very important eclipse, to me at least. But you have to watch out for the Neptunian element, because it can introduce false hope. It can introduce a little delulu, right? Little delulu self-deception, where we get too optimistic and convince ourselves of things that aren't true, right? Or we take stupid risks, So still be intelligent. Be judicious about this. Yeah? And of course, be aware of your horoscopes here, because I think a lot of the information I give is pretty prescient. So now let's move on. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope it was useful. So now let's move on to live chart readings, but I'm glad some of you liked that. I'm glad a lot of you liked that and appreciated those horoscopes. So anyway, who wants their chart read? Who wants their chart read? Who wants their chart read? I can read Bexy's chart because I have it right here. I have quantum function. I could always look. Oh, why don't I just start reading see, Loki Motive. Loki Motive donated too. Please, Loki Motive, I can do a free chart reading for you. Jake, Quantum, Lachana, Start throwing your stuff up on the, because, excuse me, God, I'm so sorry. I have a hiatal hernia, so when I'm able to burp, like I have to do it, because usually it's trapped in my chest. Yes, I will get to you, Bexy. Loki Motive, you donated, sweetheart. You donated, so we could look at you. Let me go to quantum function. Jake, if you want to throw your stuff up there, please, please, please put your information. Search. Quantum. Quantum. It's so interesting too, because quanta. It's like a packet of light. A packet of light. I was really interested in science for a long time. And there's a really good book I read by a physicist named Max Tegmark called Our Mathematical Universe. And he goes through all that stuff. It's really, really interesting. Like the cosmic microwave background is just the most amazing thing to me. And the whole notion of the Big Bang and quantum fluctuations that were infinitesimally minuscule, right? But without those, life couldn't have happened, because matter, you see, had to exist in clumps and not be evenly distributed, because otherwise life wouldn't have happened, or matter wouldn't have happened. So we have quantum function up here, right? Quantum has Saturn going through the first house, as we said, you know. Also, looking at what houses the moon and the sun rule in your chart is sort of interesting for the eclipse. Let's see if the eclipse is touching you. It's at 25 degrees Pisces. So, I mean, it's relatively close to your ascendant, which is pretty interesting. And you have Saturn conjunct the sun going on there. So you have your Saturn opposition, more or less, right? At least this is the time in your life where you're having Saturn opposition. And it's a difficult phase of life. To me, it's more difficult than our Saturn returns, right? When was my Saturn opposition? They happen like around, what, 14? Age 14 always sucks, right? Age 14 always sucks. It's the emotional roller coaster. Oftentimes it's when we get bullied and we're going through like really big hormonal changes. And then it happens again. You're 2 years older than me. So I guess around, what's that, 42, 43 is another Saturn opposition. You know, and that's around the time of the Uranus opposition too. So it's like midlife crisis time. You know, so this can be a difficult phase of life. Yes. Where we start to, and there's a reason why it's called the midlife crisis. We get very dissatisfied with our life direction in general, you know, very dissatisfied with it. And Saturn rules your 11th and your 12th houses. And we'll just do this very quickly, of course. You see? But to me, the lesson of this eclipse has to do with your independence, right? And on the other side of it, being able to be vulnerable with people, because the sense of vulnerability comes from a sense of self-confidence, right? When you are secure in yourself and your emotions and all these sorts of things, right? We have a greater ability to be secure in ourselves and thereby offer more to people, right? So, to be more constructive in other people's lives. But protect yourself. This is also about having boundaries. So if you had been, you know, reclusive, if you had been having a sense of loneliness and all these sorts of things, you're going to see that improve, because it comes from a new relationship to yourself, which is what Saturn in the first house means anyway. So, but let's go on. Let's go on. Where's Aries here? You see, and this is a phase of your life where the eclipses are going back and forth here, the solar eclipses, between the 2nd and 8th house. So this is about learning to let go, and on the same token, learning how to manage your resources and your possessions. Once again, to give you a greater sense of security. But let's move on to the next person. We did quantum. Is Loki here? Is Loki here? Bexy will do you in a little bit. Jake, Loki. Oh, Jake, you got your stuff here. Okay. I know you're not Jake. I just keep calling you Jake. I'm sorry. So let's get Lachana quick. I wonder if I had Lachana. Because I know you've been here before. Lachana. I do have you. I do have you. November the 12th, 1975. 11/11. Elfte, Elfte. I think that's how you say it in German. Elfte, Elfte. 11/11. That was Armistice Day from World War I. November the 11th. So anyway, we have a Capricorn rising, yes. So Saturn is particularly interesting to Lachana. Lachana's another Saturn girl like me, you know? And when I first see Saturn and Leo in the 8th house, I'm like, I'm so sorry, sweetheart. You know, I wonder if there was a sense of self-harm. Because oftentimes that I mean, I saw something like this in Ernest Hemingway's chart that always stuck out to me. And a lot of my clients either had, thoughts of self-harm or did self-harm type things with this placement. And I expect money has been difficult for you. You know, there's a sense of learning about loss throughout life. And it's not always loss in a terrible way, like it's learning to let go, of course. But I suspect you had to deal with death at a young age. I suspect you had to deal with death at a young age. And you could tell me if that's true or not. I may be totally off base, and I often, don't get things correct. But it's not all terrible, you see. It's not all terrible. No self-harm, just a lot of overthinking and self-doubt. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry, sweetheart. Sometimes there's, like dad is involved in drugs or criminal behavior or something illegal in some way, But yeah, the 8th house is primarily death. So we have to face death early on. I need some bottoms that go with this top. See, I've lost almost 20 pounds. I know it still looks like I have a belly, and I kind of do, but it's a lot less of one than I did have. I was 185 pounds, and now I'm 165. So anyway, where did all my viewers go? You rapscallions. You rapscallions. So anyway, in terms of all this stuff going on right now, though, you're already a Pisces moon. And so this eclipse to me is pretty interesting for you because you've got about your dad. Yeah, I'm sorry, sweetheart. That's a tough one. And Saturn's not very happy, right? So dad being involved in shady shit. Now, mom was probably codependent and sensitive, and dad probably treated her like shit and took advantage of her, right? Now, how can I tell that? Because the moon is in Pisces. And in the 3rd house. So I imagine she was, maybe a poetic type lady or something. I don't know. It's a possibility. It's also quite likely you had a difficult experience of her too. But the reason I bring up the creativity and poetry stuff is because you see Mercury here, trine the moon. Now, I bet you're actually a very poetic type person or a good communicator as well. I would imagine so. Look at this Mars square Venus like that. That's awesome. It can be a bit abrasive. You might have sort of a more, you might make men uncomfortable because they see you as more of a masculine woman or whatever. But it's a very happy Venus and a very angry Mars, so you're probably still a bit passive aggressive. Like you're uncomfortable getting mad. And what we tend to do with Mars and Cancer is we let and especially retrograde like you have it, we let things build up and build up and build up, And then we explode, right? So anyway, So anyway, this eclipse thing is quite important because it's giving you your voice back, you see? And you may have felt a bit like Ariel right over the past year or so. Ah, right? Like Ursula had taken your voice, and now you're starting to find it again, right? There should be an optimism about speaking your mind and expressing yourself, whether it's for work or whatever else, you know? Yeah, of course you make men at work very uncomfortable. You've also got Pluto conjunct Venus, not super close, but they're still conjunct at the top of your chart. So you're going to have a powerful presence, and you'll probably be quite creepy or have a darker kind of aesthetic. Like, I'm sure you love Halloween. This is Halloween. This is Halloween. You know? So anyway, but this is all good stuff in many ways because it's encouraging you to express yourself again, especially if you felt stifled. Like maybe you couldn't speak up at work, or maybe you felt like bosses were dismissing or disregarding what you've been saying. So you start to get your gumption back. So that's Lachana. That's Lachana. And we have Jake. I know it's not. Oh, I missed this. Jake. I'm so sorry. I don't know what your name is. Loki, I wish you were still here. I saw your video about the Second Civil War. It was really good. I love the history of it all. I mean, in a way, it was kind of clickbait to say, will there be a second Civil War? Because we know that it's not possible the way it was in the 1860s. What it looks more like is sort of unorganized, widespread political violence. Which is what I say in there. But you see, the history is so important because people don't know a lot of this history, and they don't pay attention to what's going on now. Like, people don't know what's going on, I'm awesome. Thank you, Lachana. I appreciate it. See, my first inclination is like, yeah, I know I'm awesome. It's my stupid arrogance. My first house ruler is Saturn, exalted in Libra in the 9th house. I love your chart readings. Yeah, you see, I'm like the best at it because I'm really good off the cuff, and I can connect it to bigger themes. And a lot of younger people who do readings, they just haven't been through, they haven't had enough life experience oftentimes to say things. Or you can't be an astrologer if you're not interested in history. If you can't situate yourself in time and space, then you're not going to be effective, and you're not going to know what you're talking about. So you have to be a very well-rounded person to be an effective astrologer, unfortunately. Or fortunately for me, because it makes me more interesting in the sea of astrologers out there, because there's so fucking many. It's really not a very lucrative thing to be in, right? Because the chances of you ever getting recognized by anyone, or, I prefer being on YouTube, and I'm going to start doing Twitch soon. I prefer doing all that because I'm a ham, I'm an exhibitionist, and I'm a performer type. But I'm very good at giving readings too, obviously. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm just trying to let people know. And I think most of you can testify to that. Let's testify. Okay, let's see. I heard someone once say, don't get your chart read unless they've had a Saturn return. So fucking stupid. Ugh, I hate fucking astrologers. Especially modern astrologers. They see all kinds of stupid shit. Let me take a bite of my breakfast because it's just been sitting here getting cold. I mean, it's well past lunchtime now. I hate fucking astrologers, especially modern ones, because they make up all kinds of bullshit. And they can do it with impunity, because nobody knows any better. And they're just trying to get clicks and traffic. Like, my stupid Facebook feed has been having all these weird, like, which type of witch are you? Are you A dark witch? Are you a home witch? Are you a forest witch? Which witch is which? I'm like, it's just clickbait for women. And I know, because I did the same shit. I'm like, what kind of witch am I? What's my dark feminine power? And I understand, because these things are empowering for us as women, especially because most of us have felt powerless or had our power taken away or have been abused or assaulted, right? So it's very empowering for us. But it's more empowering to give ourselves the actual knowledge and skills rather to rest in a sense of fantasy, right? I mean, if that's your beliefs and it's useful for you, yes. I mean, I totally get it. That's not going to teach you astrology, and it doesn't make you an effective person. Making yourself an effective person comes from doing things and from accomplishment. That's what builds our confidence, right? And some people will just never be effective people because they don't care to be, right? You're not born with talents. I mean, we have proclivities, we have things that we're interested in, but we're not born gifted. The gift is the desire to do it. The gift for me, I wasn't born being a good astrologer. I had the desire and the passion to do it, So anyway, so we're going to look at Jake's chart. I don't mean to be going off on a tangent, but it's important for me to recognize that women need empowerment. Men have plenty of empowerment. I know these days men aren't getting fucked and they're pissed, but if they were just a little bit nicer, they'd probably get more sex. Which is why I see these, anyway, I won't go off into all that. Empowerment's important, but it comes from knowledge. Knowledge is power. Knowledge and awareness are power, not hiding ourselves in the sand around ideas that we're a witch and all these sorts of things. A lot of the things that we take for our beliefs now, especially white people, I hate to say, come from theosophy. And those are distortions of older cultures. I appreciate when people get into their Celtic roots or even Roman, Greek. I mean, everyone has roots. Everyone has ancestors. Just mine were assholes. I'm pretty sure my dad told me a couple of my ancestors owned slaves. I know, I'm the slut witch. I was showing Bexy the picture of all the witches, and I'm like, they don't have slut here. Where's the slut? She's like, you're more of a mommy witch. And I'm like, okay, I'm a mommy witch, but I'm also a slutty mommy witch, So anyway, Gemini rising for Jake. This is quite important. This is quite important, you see, because Pisces is the 10th house. And Bexy, you could pay attention to this too, right? So this is important also because Jupiter, you have Jupiter, very happy in rulership, the sign he rules, Pisces, up there at the top of the chart, which is pretty auspicious for life direction, for getting recognized, right? For getting good accolades and kudos, right? That's all well and good, but it's just with Uranus being square, it's like the bipolar coaster, so it feels like, hey, I'm getting all this good stuff, and wait, where did it all go? Up and down, up and down. But what this should signify to you is that the feeling of being stifled and stunted is coming to a gradual close, right? This is where you start to see optimism in terms of your career or your life direction. Now, it could be that new opportunities sort of emerge and blossom out of nowhere, or seemingly out of nowhere, right? Or it could be that a boss or an authority figure gives you a bit of, introduces you to an opportunity. Oh, hey, I heard about this job at this other place. You should apply or whatever. This is really good for... This is really good for starting in a new direction, right? Because you were probably feeling ultimately dissatisfied. Now, the other thing about all this for a Gemini rising, Kamala Harris is Gemini rising too. And Jupiter, right, is going through your first house. And I think Jupiter will be relatively close-ish to your ascendant, starting in late November. So this is all very auspicious, November into December, because Jupiter's crossing your ascendant. Now, on the one hand, you may have gained a little bit of weight because, indulgent. It's like, ooh, I've got sweet cakes. Like, let me put some more syrup on those waffles. I don't eat that shit, but you feel me? See, I'm a Saturn girl, so I try and keep no food in the house that I enjoy. you know. Um. So anyway, there's a sense of optimism here. You see, between now and next summer. And next summer, Jupiter is going to go into your second house, exalted. And that should really give you more security in your financial situation. You might start a business. That's what I did with Jupiter in my second house. Excuse me. Start a new job. And you see how all these things sort of align together? And with Jupiter going through your first house, it's easier to sell yourself. When you have Chiron in your first house, you typically don't have great confidence, you know? OMG, I did have, from all the surgeries over the last few years in the birth control, I went from 140 to 200 pounds in a year. You have endometriosis. I'm so sorry, darling. I've had ex-partners, and I think family members who've dealt with that, so I know how difficult. I've seen how difficult that can be for people. So I'm so sorry. But things do get better, especially next year. But you have to understand this period is good for you too, because it does start to give you a sense of confidence a bit more. You become more and more secure in your abilities, right? Because with Chiron in the first house, you probably didn't have that very much growing up. You probably tried to look for your value through other people, It was about this time last year that I changed positions at work, and I'm not mad if it happened again. Yeah, you see, in this time last year, Saturn was going into Pisces. I mean, was sort of firmly in Pisces, but you feel me? So, this is great stuff. Now, Mars is going through your second house right now, my darling. So you got to be very careful of spending money at the moment, right? And then in November, Mars is going to go into Leo, your third house. So watch out for cutting off siblings or other family members, right? Watch out for that kind of thing. When Mars went through my third house, I had an ex-partner break up with me because I said really nasty shit. I'm not proud of it. And I don't think I would ever do that to you, Bexy. But yeah, I'm not proud of it. Just watch out. You want to hold your tongue a little bit till Mars leaves Leo. Unfortunately, Mars is going to go retrograde in Leo and won't leave until like March of next year. So, yeah, Mars is going to spend a good amount of time in Leo. Which is interesting for me because it's my 7th house. And so please don't break up with me, Bexy. Me and my brother have been going at it, damn. Yeah, I'm sorry, sweetheart. Just watch out for that because it could come to a climax in December. So you don't want to cut your brother off, or maybe you have to, I don't know. But you may be cutting off a family member in December. So just watch out with that. Anyway, I hope that's useful. Should move on to the next person. Has anyone else put their chart stuff in here? Yeah, Ho Witch. I am the Ho Witch. I'm very sweet and very loving. Bexy will tell you that. I'm not just a big bitch. Although I am one too. Excuse me. You have to watch out for your temper, though. Mars conjunct the North Node. That amplifies it. I'm not going anywhere either, Bexy. So that's good. I'm not going in. So that'll be your third house, Bexy, when Mars goes there. So just watch out for saying shitty shit. I mean, I will too. I'm the one with I have a pretty sharp tongue. In good ways and bad ways. Excuse me. You are the one. Wait, you are when you need to be. But you're kind to people who've earned it. Yeah, thank you, baby. I am. I'm so sweet, I'll give you diabetes.
You check your blood sugar, you check it often. Diabetes. You call Liberty Medical Supply. Get your insulin. Wilford Brimley.
I'm sorry, I can't help it. No one probably remembers those commercials anymore. So let's go to Bexy. Bexy, Bexy. My eyes are watering. Oh. My eyes are watering, and I don't want to mess up my makeup. I promise I'm not crying this time. I do cry often. Girl, you're hilarious. I know, thank you. At least I'm interesting. Where the fuck is your chart, baby? Did I call you a different name in here? The fuck, yo? How the fuck is it? Where's my phone? Where's my phone? Okay. I gotta start being careful about stuff that I say about other people on here, especially when they didn't consent. Because, like, my natural inclination is just to be like, oh, chat. Is this? There we go. So here's Bexy Bex. We have another Gemini rising. And you have Mars not very happy in the second house. So, yeah, watch spending money typically. But your part of fortune's also in the second house. So there's also a facility with money too. And you get more lucky about it as you get older. And then the moon, right, is in the fourth house. So, I mean, sometimes that can be generational wealth. I mean, other times it's just, it can be a fondness of history, right? A fondness of history or an awareness of genealogy, that sort of thing. Virgo moon, though, as we know, is very submissive, isn't it? I always joke about Virgo moon. You know, you could make him kneel on Legos if you wanted. Now, Bexy, you have Saturn in the ninth house like me, and we've both been interested in spirituality our whole lives, and we both became very skeptical and rejected our religion of birth, right? We both were born in very religious families. And Saturn in the ninth house is often the skeptic, you see. And you have Saturn going through your 10th house right now. We already talked about that, right? Starting to recognize new opportunities, not just at work, but in life direction. You know, this could also have to do with art, right? And you'll notice in terms of art and creativity, you have Sun in the 5th house like I do. We're also both very sexual, you know? And Jupiter in the 5th house too. Now, Venus rules your 5th house and is in Sag in the 7th house, right? Venus in Sag can be very sexual too. Can be a little slutty, you know, in a good way. I don't think I've ever met a Sag Venus who didn't shove their hands down my pants on the first date or up my skirt. You know, I'm not complaining about it. It's a fact of nature, you know. It's a fact of nature. And Jupiter's going through your first house too, baby. So, you know, on the one hand, there's the tendency to gain weight when that happens. On the other hand, though, right, we get to feel more confident and exuberant in ourselves. We get more gregarious, inclusive. We radiate more this you know? This aura, if you will. It's attractive to people. It's magnetic, right? Oftentimes we become more philosophical, right? Jupiter's wisdom, we start to feel like we've gained a bit of wisdom and we can finally express a bit of it, you see? So that's all quite important. OMG, I need to lose that shit. Yeah, I mean, don't stress on it, baby. Do not stress on that. See, but Mars here is opposite both Neptune and Uranus. I have Mars opposite Uranus too. No one can tell us shit, right? If someone does try and tell us how to do something or to do something in general, we're going to do it wrong just to spite them, won't we? So, which is sort of funny because I know a different side of you, right? That's more than happy, right? To do things for people. But you don't like to be told by authority figures. At least that's what it looks like. And you have to watch out for Neptune opposite Mars because it can give, a very sort of aggressive sense of idealism. And that can be good in some ways, but my first thought is always like Joel Osteen, like, the Lord Jesus, 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 It doesn't always have to be like that, though. It can be a fierce defender of an ideal or something. Like, we're both really into queer rights. So, that's very important stuff, too. Now, what else was I thinking? See, relationships are very important to you with Venus in the 7th house, right? There's a desire, like, to be in a long-term committed partnership, to be in love, to have a sense of mutual affection and responsibility, right? And your North Node is in the 7th house too, right? So that's what you want in life typically. The ability to share your life with someone. The ability to share your life with someone. But that's as you get older, right? That's as you get old. Well, that's as it gets more constructive, you see. Yeah, I mean, it's in your personal life too, maybe not your private life necessarily. Although the moon in the 4th house indicates that you're kind of a private person typically, you know? The moon in the 10th house is like a very extroverted person. Moon in the 4th house is usually someone who likes to recharge their batteries at home, So anyway, and then we've talked about this before, but with Pluto conjunct Mercury, it's a very sort of probing type of mind. I call it the breath that blasts. It can be quite mean sometimes or forceful with the way it says things. I've never experienced that from you, but that's typically how I've seen it manifest, right, with other people. And it could probably be more prevalent in your day job, It could be more something that you do, in your professional life, or your school life or whatever. And then Mercury in Scorpio is sort of a stalker. It could be quite paranoid too, like they always assume people are thinking or talking about them. But once again, it's an indication of a very probing type of mind, as I said. It likes to get to the bottom of things, but it's also very stubborn and doesn't admit that it's wrong. And it'll continue. Quantum functions that I have to go. Thank you, sweetheart, for coming. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, everyone who came, and I really appreciate it. Please like the stream and subscribe if you haven't already. And Quantum Function, we're going to start up the classes again soon, the membership classes. I was just having dental and other issues. So, but we're going to do the signs next, the zodiac signs, the meaning of the signs. And the class after that, we're going to do the houses, the meaning of the houses and where houses come from, what they mean. And hopefully I'll delete my other video on houses so that this information is only available to my members. Yes. So anyway, thank you, sweetheart, for coming. Now, excuse me. Ah, Venus is going through your fifth house. So this should all be about sex and fun, you know? Venus is going through my ninth house. So I don't know, though. I haven't realized or been aware. I mean, I've been studying more astrology stuff again. And I made that whole video about the possibility of a second civil war. So, which you should all check out if you haven't seen my second civil war video. My video about will there be a second civil war? You need to watch it because it's very important and good information that people don't usually get. So, we talked about Saturn, we talked about Mars, we talked about Venus, all that sort of thing. Anything else I've been missing? I don't think so. I mean, there's always more to say, but I'm not going to do a whole thing here, you see. Ugh. And then you see fourth house ruler is Mercury, and Mercury in the sixth house in Scorpio. You know, dad having chronic health issues. That's difficult. That's difficult. Anyway, so if no one else has anything, I'll probably go. Does anyone else have anything? Or I can always keep talking about eclipses. I can always keep talking about eclipses. Is there anything else I didn't say about eclipses? Ugh. I don't need to talk about all the nodes and shit. But there's a lot of stuff going on besides the eclipse. 9/11 is tomorrow, right? And how many years is that? It was 20, 22, 23 years? 23 years. That's wild. You know? That's wild. 23 years since 9/11. I remember exactly where I was on that day. I was just preparing to go to college, you know? Yes, I'm doing charts if you want to put your stuff up here, Magic System. Makes you think of the Magic School Bus. Well, go ahead and throw your chart up. The interesting thing about 9/11, and a bunch of these events had it too. Let me pull up the chart. The interesting thing about all this, oh, we have a government shutdown, October 1st. See, there's a lot of big stuff happening. There's a lot of big stuff. 9/11. Okay. See, that's the thing. Whenever we have this 9/11 stuff, oftentimes something is directly aspecting the natal Saturn of the United States, right? And natal Saturn rules the second and third house. And the World Trade Center was a major financial center, wasn't it? And that day, Saturn was exactly square, like exactly square by 3 minutes, or sorry, exactly trine by 3 minutes, natal Saturn. And then Mercury was directly on top of it, like just about exactly. So this is wild stuff, you see? This is definitely wild stuff. Correlates to you watching spending. I mean, yeah. So if you want your chart read, please hurry up and throw your stuff on there. Please, 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 please. And Pluto was exact on the ascendant of the United States on 9/11. Like, that's fucking wild. Magic System. Magic System. Let's see here. Okay, magic system. Oops, I didn't mean to close that. Oh, my eyes are watering. Oh, I've had a what? Happy recent B-Day, man. Oh, thank you for noticing. I didn't even notice that, Bexy. You're so good. I'm so oblivious. I'm so oblivious. Oblivion. Twelve a.m. Evansville. Okay, here we go. Here we go. What is a cat? What is it, cat? So anyway, well, look at this. Mars and Gemini like me. But Mars conjunct the Ascendant. I have Mars trine the Ascendant. I bet you get, I think I probably said this to you before, I think you get dry skin, dry hair, or reddish hue in some way. You have Saturn in the ninth house like I do? Did I get this right? 8/24/92. Yeah, I got it right. Hey, cat. Did you want to come here? Ooh. Okay, cat. So anyway, ninth house Saturn, like me, gosh, it can make us quite skeptical, or it makes us leave the religion of our parents, or sometimes we have a very negative experience of religion growing up, you know. And look, your North Node is in the seventh house, right? So as you get older, life becomes more and more about, you know, building constructive relationships. Whereas the part of life before age 37 or 38, you know, before 38, you know, before age 38, it's more about building your own sense of confidence and self-esteem. You know, you may be a bit assertive, you may be kind of a leader type on the outside, but I really think you probably have a difficult time with your confidence, right? Mercury rules your first house, of course, and then is then in Leo in your third house, right? Which can be a very effective communicator. But on the other hand, right, Mercury in Leo is also a terrible bullshitter oftentimes. Cat. You know, they're very good salespeople. I think of Billy Mays.
Billy Mays here for OxyClean.
Right? He had a Mercury in Leo. Three ex-presidents. Three ex-presidents, right? Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama all have a Mercury in Leo, right? And they were terrible bullshitters too, weren't they? You know,
Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction.
you know. I mean, that sure did a number on the whole world, didn't it? I'm not saying you're like that. But anyway, there is a natural confidence, you see, with the Mercury in Leo. But what I'm concerned about is Mercury opposite Saturn, you see. Now, Saturn is happy in Aquarius, but she's also retrograde, right? And when Mercury's opposite Saturn, it oftentimes gives us a sense of intellectual inferiority or difficulty speaking up. We can have speech impediments. We can have learning disabilities or neurodivergence. That sort of thing is quite prevalent. But your sense of education, right? The part of fortune in the third house often indicates that success comes from the power of your own mind, right? Either from education, from writing or speaking, you know, or from your immediate community. From your immediate community. News and media, all these sorts of things. And Chiron is here too. right? So to me, that's another indicator of possible neurodivergence or speech impediments, or sometimes we just get taken out of elementary school, and that can be another difficult thing. Now, the moon's very happy in the second house in Cancer. So hopefully you haven't had to struggle too much with money, but I'm sure you're going to have something to say to me about that. But hopefully not. Yeah, Shani, you joined late again, sweetheart, but it's okay. I mean, no one's mad at you. So anyway, you see, those are all sort of indicators of difficulty with school and learning growing up, but things improve. I mean, maybe you find yourself being a teacher. I don't know. Maybe you're involved in real estate. Um, you're on disability. It's a struggle. Oh, I'm sorry, sweetheart. On disability. That's another thing about Mars in the first house. Often indicates surgery and illnesses and things like that. You okay, cat? Jesus, these cats are weird as fuck. So, Mars rules your sixth house, right? Of injuries, illnesses, disability, all those sorts of things, right? And then Mars is in your first house. And you had your Mars return for a while when Mars was in Gemini for a good, month and a half or almost 2 months. And what happened then? Sometimes we do have surgery. Sometimes we do have injuries or, wounds or things that we have to heal, right? Good to know. I need to sort out my YouTube notifications. Yeah, and Shani, I made a stupid mistake this time. I usually schedule my lives like at least 24 hours in advance, and I forgot to schedule it. I was with Bexy, and I'm like, I have to do this right when I got home. But right when we got home, we did other things. So, This cat hair flowing around like tumbleweeds. Gosh. So anyway, you see, this is all important stuff. And in terms of the eclipse happening, it's in your 10th house, right? So Saturn's been there, making you feel stagnant and like, you had no opportunities. Your life was stuck. Life direction was stuck. But the next 6 months after this eclipse are going to, be optimistic. They're going to start, it's going to start presenting you with new directions, new opportunities, and new ways of going about this stuff, you see? So try and keep a little bit of optimism. Try and keep a little bit of optimism. I'm looking at hip replacements. Oh my God, baby, I'm so sorry. Ugh, that's so difficult. Wow. And you think about that whole area, the hips, it's right around the genitals, and that's what Scorpio rules. Gosh. Now, Venus is going to go into your 6th house here relatively soon. When does Venus go into the 6th house for you? When does Venus go into Scorpio? So at the end of the month, like September 23rd, I think that'll be a good time for healing for you to get some doctor's appointments done, to start making progress on your condition. So I think, late September through mid-October, right? Like the 23rd through the 18th. The 23rd of September through the 18th of October, you can expect more healing and a bit of, a bit of relief or easing up on your health situation, your physical situation. Now, the other thing too, with Jupiter going through your first house, by this time next year, there should be a significant improvement, right? Jupiter's going to be going through your first house until June of next year. So by the time this transit ends next summer, there should have been a significant amount of healing that you did, or addressing a lot of these issues. And you may find that you find some improvement, or you may find that you have improvement in your health over this over this next bit, you see? Over this next bit. But it really looks like your life direction is being highlighted here. It really does. So anyway, if there's no other questions, are there any other questions? I guess Shaney's here. I could say something about Shaney quick. There we go. So Shaney, Scorpio rising. We talked about this earlier. This is sort of a nice thing because, you know, life has been chaotic for the past year and a half, you know, more than a year. And probably very difficult to keep a handle on things. Very unorganized, very sort of stressful. With Saturn going through the 5th house. Unable to enjoy ourselves, you see? God, so much cat hair. Ugh. Unable to enjoy ourselves. And what's happening here with the lunar eclipse is that the moon is in your 5th house. And remember, these lunar eclipses are like big beginnings and big endings. So it's like a part of this whole Saturnian cycle is coming to a close, you know. And so the next 6 months here is going to be about learning to have fun again, to be creative, to enjoy yourself, right? To enjoy life, because life has probably felt tedious, monotonous, stressful, right? Unorganized, lack of control, right? And you're going to have to let things be and just deal with it. Let things be the way they are and try and enjoy yourself. Yeah. You might find yourself all of a sudden wanting to go to, you know, concerts or sporting events or what, I don't know what you do, but finding fun things to do, things that you enjoy, right? So anyway, but yeah, go back and watch it, you know? Go back and watch it. I have to move on, and I have to go eat the rest of my lunch now, and then I have to keep working on the next bit. I wanted to do a video about 9/11, but 9/11's tomorrow, and I don't know if it's going to happen. I have to do... See, this, I've already talked about the eclipse, so I'll just clip it out of here. But 9/11's an interesting one, you know? It's definitely interesting. And then I still have my whole Lilith series to do. You know, the Lilith video is going to be long. So, anyway, it's time to get back on the ball. I'm going to be more regular with lives again and, you know, knock on wood unless I have more health issues that come up. And like I said, for those of you who are members, we're going to do the next installment of our ancient astrology lessons, right? The installments that we've done already are basic introduction with the history, right, and all that sort of stuff. And then we did a basic introduction of the planets, right? And now we're about to do a basic introduction of the signs next. And then we're going to have a basic introduction of all the houses. When I say a basic introduction, I still do almost a 2-hour class each time. And we go pretty in depth, you know. And we look at other materials, right? We have other study materials we look at. And then we use my wonderful knowledge, yeah. So please consider joining and becoming a member of my channel because you're going to get these wonderful perks. You know, you're going to be my guinea pig for my astrology lessons. So, anyway, I love you all. Please like this stream, subscribe to my channel, share my shit with your friends and family. I need more supporters. I need more members. I'm very scared of my money situation. So please, I need all the help I can get. And thank you for all your support thus far.